Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. On Tuesday, April 28th, I did an interview with Matthew Brian Shorting, who is an Anishinaabe Indigenous person from Canada. He works in men's group. He's a community reporter, father, Sundancer, Deer Clan, and helper. He was also featured on TEDx Winnipeg in 2019, where he shared adverse childhood experiences and how to heal from this while working through interpersonal conflicts in society. So we talked about intergenerational trauma. So what is intergenerational trauma? It is historical trauma that occurs when trauma caused by historical oppression is passed down to generations. In Shorting's perspective, he believes intergenerational trauma starts from system structures. During the interview, Shorting discussed how intergenerational trauma affects the nervous system. And when I think about the nervous system in the body, it seems obvious, but it really hits me how intergenerational trauma is in our body and it lives within us. He also talked about before contact, the Indigenous people in Canada were doing well, not perfect, but better. There was so much destruction of land, food, and environment, said Shorting. When speaking to Shorting, I reflect on my own communities and start to see the parallels among the South Sudanese community in Canada. So who are the first generation South Sudanese Canadians? From the mid-80s to early 2000s, under the Immigration and Refugee Act, immigrants from Sudan, and after 2011 separation, now South Sudan, were settled in major cities of Canada. These cities are now home to South Sudanese communities who are building a sense of belonging in society. The first generation South Sudanese Canadians are about the age of 0 to 35. These include those that were born in Canada and came to Canada at a younger age. Me and Shorting also talked about epigenetics, which refers to the way your behavior and environment can cause changes that affect your genes, which goes back to how Shorting discussed how intergenerational trauma affects the nervous system and how trauma can affect behavior and how people do things. Children growing up in war zones, such as those in Palestine, Ukraine, Sudan, and other regions, are not only affected by immediate physiological trauma, but also by biological changes that shape their future health and behavior. Children may display aggressive behavioral difficulties, not a matter of personal choice, but a consequence of the physiological imprint of trauma. Shorting mentions that there had been studies on epigenetics that even if a person was not in the war, they still behaved the behavior of somebody that was exposed to war. When I reflect on the South Sudanese community in Canada, looking at parents and children and how a lot of parents were shocked when coming to a new land in Canada. Families were impoverished because of lack of language, gang violence, gender-based violence, mental health, and isolation, sense of belonging. However, there are many community organizations in Calgary who are helping the community, such as the South Sudanese Community of Calgary, South Sudanese Youth of Canada, and Nile Care Advocacy for Peace and Development, NileCAP, trying to help the community members connect with their culture and seek support. When speaking to one of the community members, he revealed to me that there are about 800 South Sudanese homeless people, or over 800 South Sudanese people in Calgary, which is a significant number. And somebody who's interested in intergenerational trauma, it will be interesting to see the links because of trauma and homelessness. During the interview, I also talked with Shorting about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Red Dress Day, which is coming up on May 5th. Shorting mentioned that missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Two-Spirit is a crisis that's happening in Canada and in the United States. He said that in 2016 there was a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Two-Spirit people, which was launched by the government and Justin Trudeau. The inquiry was independent of the federal government and had to mandate to examine, investigate, and report on systemic causes of violence experienced by Indigenous women and girls. There is a disproportionate number of missing and murdered Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people in Canada, and asked Shorting why is this happening. He goes back to the Indian Act, which has a lot of policies that affect Indigenous people. He mentions how the Indian Act was one of the policies that for example, if an Indigenous woman married a non-Indigenous man, she would lose her status. But if an Indigenous man married a non-Indigenous woman, she would gain status. So it says a lot about how women are seen and not valuable compared to men. And those beliefs are still present to this day, with a large amount of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people in Canada. On May 5th, it's National Day of Awareness of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, Two-Spirit people in Canada, also known as Red Dress Day. And here's some information about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. Indigenous women and girls, Two-Spirit, and diverse gendered people are at a higher risk of experiencing violence than non-Indigenous women, 12 times more likely to go missing or murdered in comparison to non-Indigenous women in Canada. Winnipeg Police Service reported that over 60% of missing persons cases in 2022 involved Indigenous women or girls. In the interview, I wore a red jacket and pin, and Shorting asked if I knew the meaning of it. I suggested that it's for the survivors who were missing and murdered, and he agreed and also added that it was created by Métis artist Jamie Black, who created the Red Dress Project installation. Shorting also discussed about Tina Fontaine, who was also a missing and murdered Indigenous girl, one of the cases that happened in Canada back in 2014. She was a 15-year-old girl from the Sudanese First Nation in Manitoba. She went missing in July 2014, and her body was found wrapped in a plastic duvet cover in Winnipeg's Red River on August 17, 2014. There are so many cases of Indigenous missing people in Canada, and Red Dress Day is a time to remember and reflect and try to stop these issues from happening in Canada. And for closing and healing, Shorting talks about sweat lodges and ceremony and celebrations for Indigenous people are ways of healing. And he even said that non-Indigenous people can attend, depending on the organization and the location, but usually very open. And you also check to see who your counselor is to make sure the type of therapy that they provide works for you. And healing takes time. It comes in small pieces. It's not going to happen in one day. And it was an honor to speak with Matthew Brian Shorting. He does so much for the community and men's group, and he has so much knowledge on intergenerational trauma. And I learned a little bit of Ojibwe. So saying goodbye in Ojibwe, or I'll see you later to one person, because there's no word for goodbye, is Gia Wabamin. So Gia Wabamin, everyone. And also this interview was done in Calgary, which is home to the traditional land and home to the Blackfoot Confederacy, Tusatina and Escoti Nations. And it was also done in Winnipeg, which is on Treaty 1, which is the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Inuit, the Nakota, the Métis, Red River Métis, and so much more. And also Calgary is located on Treaty 7. So thank you so much for listening, and please let me know in the comments of what you think about these topics and how these two communities are very different, but there is some intersectionality in terms of the intergenerational trauma piece. And if anyone has any more information on intergenerational trauma, intergenerational scholars out there, or people interested in that, please comment, share, and send any links that could help me with my further research and with this story that I've written. So thank you. Bye.